There is a moment in every relationship where a man is tested, not by how loudly he argues, not by how hard he fights to be chosen, but by how he responds when he realizes he is no longer valued the way he should be. Most men panic in that moment. They over-explain, they overgive, they try to convince someone to see their worth. But there is another kind of man, the one who notices the shift, feels the imbalance, and chooses to walk away without drama. Walking away is often misunderstood as cruelty, avoidance, or emotional failure. People assume that leaving means you did not care enough, did not try hard enough, or gave up too easily. But the truth is far more uncomfortable and far more powerful. Walking away is not abandonment. It is a declaration of self-respect. It is the moment a person chooses inner alignment over external approval, dignity over attachment, and clarity over chaos. Self-respect begins where tolerance ends. When someone consistently dismisses your needs, minimizes your presence, or takes your effort for granted, staying does not make you loyal, it makes you invisible. Walking away in that moment is not an act of punishment toward the other person. It is an act of protection toward yourself. It is the quiet refusal to keep shrinking in spaces where you are no longer valued. Abandonment is rooted in avoidance. Self-respect is rooted in awareness. A person who abandons runs from responsibility, discomfort, and accountability. A person who walks away has already faced those things internally. They have acknowledged the truth of the situation, even when that truth hurts. They leave not because they lack emotion, but because they respect themselves enough to not let emotion override self-worth. There is a deep strength in choosing silence over explanation. When someone no longer listens, explanations become performances. Walking away removes you from the role of trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. It says without words, I will not fight to prove my value. That decision alone reshapes how others perceive you, and more importantly, how you perceive yourself. Many people stay too long because they confuse endurance with love. They believe that suffering is proof of commitment. But love that requires you to betray yourself is not love, it is attachment. Walking away breaks that illusion. It draws a line between connection and self-erasure. It reminds you that you are allowed to leave situations that drain you, even if you once loved deeply. Self-respect is not loud. It does not announce itself or seek validation. It shows up in calm exits, steady posture, and emotional control. A person who walks away with self-respect does not burn bridges or create chaos. They simply stop crossing oceans for people who would not step over a puddle for them. This kind of departure leaves an imprint. Not because of manipulation, but because it exposes imbalance. When someone realizes you chose peace over their inconsistency, it forces reflection. They feel the weight of what they lost, not because you begged them to see it, but because you did not. Walking away is not the absence of love. Often it is the presence of self-love finally taking precedence. It is the moment you decide that your worth does not require negotiation. And once that decision is made, you never truly lose, regardless of who stays or goes. The man who leaves calmly is often misunderstood. His silence is mistaken for indifference, his restraint labeled as emotional coldness, and his decision to walk away interpreted as weakness. But in reality, calm departure reveals something far rarer and far more powerful: emotional mastery. It shows a man who is not governed by impulse, fear, or the need to be validated in moments of emotional intensity. Emotional mastery begins with self-regulation. Most people react before they reflect. They raise their voices, demand answers, or cling harder when they feel loss approaching. A calm man does the opposite. He notices the shift in respect, the imbalance in effort, the erosion of mutual regard, and instead of reacting, he responds. That pause between feeling and action is not emptiness, it is control. Weakness seeks relief through expression, strength seeks clarity through restraint. A man who storms out, insults, or dramatizes his exit is still emotionally entangled. He needs the other person to feel his pain. The man who leaves calmly has already processed his emotions internally. He does not need to transfer his discomfort onto someone else to feel justified. That internal processing is the mark of maturity. Calmness in departure also signals self-sufficiency. It communicates that his sense of identity is not dependent on the relationship's outcome. He is not leaving to provoke regret or chase a reaction. He is leaving because he understands that staying in a misaligned dynamic would cost him his self-respect. That understanding is grounded in emotional intelligence, not emotional detachment. There is a quiet dignity in choosing not to argue with reality. When someone consistently shows you who they are, calmness is the acceptance of truth rather than the denial of it. The calm man does not beg for consistency or demand effort. He recognizes that desire cannot be negotiated. By leaving peacefully, he preserves his integrity and avoids turning disappointment into resentment. Emotional mastery also means resisting the urge to explain endlessly. Explanation often comes from the need to be seen as good, reasonable, or misunderstood. A man who leaves calmly knows that clarity does not require consensus. He accepts that not everyone will understand his decision, and he does not sacrifice his peace trying to correct their perception. That acceptance reflects inner stability. Calm departure is what leaves the deepest impact. Chaos is easy to dismiss. Anger can be rationalized. But calmness creates dissonance. It forces reflection because it removes the distractions of drama. The other person is left alone with the reality of his absence and the reasons behind it. His composure becomes a mirror, revealing what was lost. Leaving calmly is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of discipline. It means feeling deeply without acting destructively. It means choosing self-respect over momentary relief. The man who leaves calmly does not collapse, retaliate, or chase closure. He carries his emotions with composure, and in doing so reveals a strength that cannot be faked or ignored. Silence after departure is often mistaken for avoidance, immaturity, or emotional shutdown. People expect explanations, justifications, long messages that tie every loose end into something digestible. But silence, when chosen consciously, carries far more weight than words ever could. It is not the absence of communication. It is the presence of certainty, and that certainty speaks louder than any explanation. Explanations are often given to soothe guilt, manage perception, or soften the discomfort of leaving. They come from the need to be understood, approved of, or seen as reasonable. Silence comes from a different place entirely. It comes from acceptance. When someone has fully understood the situation, they no longer feel the urge to convince anyone else of its reality. Silence says, I have made peace with this decision without needing validation. Words invite debate. Silence closes the door. When you explain yourself, you leave space for negotiation, misinterpretation, and emotional bargaining. Every sentence becomes something to argue with, dissect, or dismiss. Silence removes that power. It creates a boundary that cannot be crossed through logic or persuasion. That boundary forces the other person to sit with their own thoughts instead of reacting to yours. Silence after departure also preserves dignity. Emotional outpouring may feel honest, but it often exposes vulnerability to people who no longer protect it. By choosing silence, a person refuses to give their emotional energy to someone who has already shown they cannot hold it responsibly. This is not emotional suppression, it is emotional discernment. What makes silence so powerful is its finality, not in a dramatic sense, but in a grounded one. It communicates that the decision was not impulsive or reactive. It was considered. It was measured. It was complete. Silence signals that there is nothing left to clarify because the clarity has already been reached internally. For the one left behind, silence creates space for reflection. Without explanations to distract or defend against, the mind begins to replay moments, patterns, and missed signals. Silence removes the comfort of immediate closure and replaces it with introspection. That is why it lingers. That is why it is remembered. Not because it was meant to punish, but because it revealed truth without embellishment. Silence also protects the person who leaves. Re-explaining pain can reopen wounds that are trying to heal. Each message becomes a step backward into emotional chaos. Silence allows healing to move forward uninterrupted. It is an act of self-respect, not emotional cruelty. In a world where people overshare to feel seen, silence stands out as strength. It demonstrates emotional control, self-awareness, and the ability to walk away without needing to narrate the exit. Silence after departure does not shout. It does not defend itself. And precisely because of that, it carries a weight that explanations never will. Scarcity has long been misunderstood as a tactic, something engineered, calculated, or used to control another person's attention. When done that way, it feels hollow, artificial, and eventually exhausting. But scarcity creates real value only when it is rooted in dignity, not manipulation. The difference lies in intention. One comes from self-respect, the other comes from insecurity. Manipulative scarcity is performative. It disappears to provoke anxiety, withholds to gain leverage, and creates distance to trigger pursuit. It is driven by the fear of being ordinary or replaceable. Dignified scarcity, on the other hand, is a natural outcome of a person who does not overextend, over-explain, or overstay where they are not fully valued. It is not designed, it simply exists. When a person knows their worth, their time and energy become selective. They are not constantly available, not because they are playing hard to get, but because they have standards about where they invest emotionally. This selectivity creates scarcity without effort. It signals that access is earned through consistency, respect, and mutual investment. That signal is powerful because it is authentic. Value increases when something is not endlessly accessible. But true value emerges only when absence is accompanied by integrity. A person who steps back calmly, without resentment or theatrics, communicates that their presence was intentional and meaningful. Their absence then carries weight, not confusion. People don't miss manipulators. They feel relieved by them. They miss those who left with dignity. Dignified scarcity does not chase attention. It does not monitor reactions or wait for regret. It is not concerned with being missed. It is concerned with being aligned. That alignment is what people respond to. When someone removes themselves from a dynamic that lacks reciprocity, it highlights the imbalance that was previously ignored. Scarcity becomes a mirror, not a weapon. Manipulation relies on unpredictability to create attachment. Dignity relies on consistency to establish respect. One destabilizes, the other clarifies. When scarcity is manipulative, it creates anxiety and obsession. When it is dignified, it creates reflection and appreciation. The emotional response is different because the foundation is different. People are instinctively drawn to those who do not need to be everywhere to feel significant. A dignified person does not linger where they are tolerated instead of cherished. They leave when their presence is diluted, not to teach a lesson, but to honor themselves. That choice transforms absence into value. Scarcity rooted in dignity also preserves self-worth. There is no internal conflict, no second guessing, no need to check if the other person noticed. The value is not derived from reaction, it is derived from self-alignment. That is why it lasts. In the end, scarcity only creates value when it is honest. When it emerges from self-respect rather than strategy, it becomes undeniable, not because it was used to control someone, but because it revealed the quiet strength of someone who knows when to stay and when to walk away. A man who knows his worth does not negotiate it through desperation, because desperation is the language of self-doubt. When a man begins to plead, over-explain, or chase validation, he unknowingly communicates that his value is conditional, dependent on being chosen, approved of, or reassured. True worth, however, is not something that can be bargained for. It is something that stands firm even in the face of rejection. Desperation arises when identity is attached to outcome. When a man believes his importance depends on whether someone stays, responds, or reciprocates, he begins to negotiate himself down. He offers more than is required, accepts less than he deserves, and compromises boundaries just to maintain connection. In doing so, he teaches others how to treat him, not through words, but through tolerance. A man who knows his worth understands that attraction and respect cannot be coerced. He does not try to convince someone to value him because he recognizes that desire born from pressure is fragile and temporary. Instead of chasing reassurance, he observes behavior. Instead of arguing for effort, he evaluates consistency. His confidence is quiet because it is internal, not performative. Negotiation through desperation often disguises itself as love. It sounds like patience, loyalty, or persistence, but when patience erodes self-respect, it stops being a virtue and becomes self-betrayal. A man rooted in his worth can differentiate between genuine effort and emotional self-sacrifice. He knows that staying in a dynamic that diminishes him will eventually cost him his peace, his confidence, and his identity. Knowing one's worth also means being willing to walk away from situations that require you to prove it. A man who respects himself does not demand better treatment. He removes himself from disrespect. This is not avoidance. It is discernment. He does not need closure conversations filled with emotional bargaining. His boundaries speak clearly through action. There is strength in restraint. When a man resists the urge to chase, to fix, or to overfunction emotionally, he preserves his power. He allows others to meet him where he stands rather than dragging himself down to be accepted. That stance naturally filters out dynamics that are rooted in imbalance. Desperation seeks immediate relief from discomfort. Self-worth tolerates temporary discomfort for long-term integrity. A man who knows his worth understands that loneliness is less damaging than losing himself in a relationship that erodes his dignity. He chooses solitude over submission. Worth is not proven by how much you endure or how hard you fight to stay. It is revealed by what you refuse to tolerate. A man who knows his worth does not negotiate it through desperation, because he knows that what is truly valuable never needs to beg to be chosen. Emotional independence is often misunderstood as emotional distance, but the two are not the same. Emotional independence does not mean a lack of feeling or an inability to connect. It means the ability to feel deeply without losing oneself. This quality is far more attractive than emotional availability without boundaries, because it signals strength, self-awareness, and stability rather than neediness and overexposure. When someone is emotionally available without boundaries, they offer access without discernment. They respond instantly, give endlessly, and prioritize another person's emotional needs above their own. At first, this can feel comforting, even flattering, but over time, it creates imbalance. The person becomes predictable, overextended, and emotionally drained. Availability without boundaries does not deepen attraction, it dilutes it. Emotional independence, on the other hand, creates a grounded presence. An emotionally independent man does not rely on constant reassurance to feel secure. He does not panic when space appears, nor does he chase connection to soothe insecurity. His emotional world is stable, and that stability is felt by others. It creates safety without suffocation. Attraction thrives on balance. When one person overinvests emotionally, the dynamic shifts from connection to caretaking. Emotional independence prevents that shift. It allows a man to be present without being consumed, attentive without being absorbed. He listens, supports, and connects, but he does not abandon himself in the process. That self-containment is deeply compelling. Boundaries are what transform availability into value. Without them, emotional availability becomes access without effort. With boundaries, it becomes a privilege. An emotionally independent man chooses when and how he invests emotionally. This selectivity communicates that his energy is intentional, not desperate. People are drawn to what is chosen, not what is freely given without condition. Emotional independence also prevents emotional manipulation. A man who can regulate his emotions internally cannot be easily controlled by fear of loss or rejection. He does not stay in unhealthy dynamics out of anxiety. He does not overgive to secure attachment. His steadiness allows relationships to be built on mutual desire rather than emotional dependency. This independence also invites respect. People respect those who can stand alone emotionally because it signals inner strength. It shows that connection is a choice, not a necessity. That distinction matters. When someone knows you are with them because you want to be, not because you need them, attraction deepens. Emotional availability without boundaries often seeks validation. Emotional independence offers presence without expectation. One drains, the other grounds. One clings, the other connects. The difference is subtle but powerful. In the end, emotional independence is attractive because it reflects wholeness. It shows a man who can love without losing himself, support without collapsing, and walk away if respect disappears. That balance, openness anchored in self-respect, is what creates lasting attraction, not endless availability that comes at the cost of dignity. Power dynamics in relationships are rarely about control. They are about leverage. Leverage is created by who needs who more, who is willing to tolerate less, and who can walk away without losing themselves. Walking away resets the power dynamic not through confrontation or force, but through clarity. It does so quietly, without a single argument, because true power does not announce itself. Arguments often reveal imbalance. The one who argues is usually trying to restore respect, demand change, or be seen. In doing so, they expose emotional dependence. Walking away does the opposite. It removes participation from a dynamic that no longer feels reciprocal. That withdrawal immediately shifts the balance because it removes access, attention, and emotional labor without negotiation. When someone stays and argues, they are still invested in being heard. When someone walks away, they demonstrate that their self-respect does not require consensus. This is where the power resets. The other person is no longer reacting to words or emotions. They are responding to absence. Absence forces reality to surface without distortion. Walking away also eliminates the cycle of emotional bargaining. Arguments often loop endlessly because they are fueled by hope that the other person will suddenly change. Leaving breaks that loop. It communicates that boundaries are non-negotiable and that respect is not something to be debated into existence. This decisiveness alters perception instantly. Power is not dominance. it is autonomy. A person who can leave without drama signals that they are not trapped by fear of loss. They are not staying for potential promises or memories. They are anchored in the present reality of how they are treated. That anchoring is what shifts the dynamic. The absence of argument is what makes walking away so impactful. Without raised voices or accusations, there is no defensive shield for the other person to hide behind. They cannot dismiss the situation as emotional chaos. They are left with a single, undeniable fact. The relationship ended because access ended. That simplicity is confronting. Walking away also reclaims internal power. Instead of expending energy trying to change someone else, the person redirects that energy inward. This internal realignment strengthens self-trust. Once someone knows they can leave and survive emotionally, they are no longer controlled by fear. That internal shift is felt externally. Silence after walking away allows the power dynamic to settle naturally. There is no attempt to manage perception or control outcome. The person who leaves is no longer performing emotional labor. That withdrawal alone redefines value. What was once taken for granted becomes noticeable only when it is gone. In the end, walking away resets the power dynamic because it removes imbalance at its source. It does not fight for respect, it demonstrates it. And in doing so, it changes everything without a single argument spoken. Inner stability is quiet, but it is unmistakable. It does not announce itself through confidence tricks, emotional displays, or grand declarations of strength. It reveals itself in restraint, in composure, and in the refusal to beg, chase, or collapse when circumstances become uncertain. This is the trait women can't ignore, not because it is performative, but because it is grounded. A man with inner stability does not panic when attention shifts or when effort becomes inconsistent. He notices change without being consumed by it. Where others rush to fix, plead, or demand reassurance, he pauses. That pause is powerful. It shows that his sense of self is not tied to external validation. He does not need to be chosen to feel whole. Begging is an attempt to negotiate worth. Chasing is an attempt to reclaim control. Collapsing is the surrender of identity in the face of loss. Inner stability rejects all three, not out of pride, but out of self-trust. A stable man knows that lowering himself for temporary comfort will cost him long-term respect, both from others and from himself. This stability is deeply attractive because it creates emotional safety. Women instinctively sense when a man's emotions are regulated from within rather than outsourced onto them. There is no pressure to constantly reassure, rescue, or manage his emotional state. His presence feels solid, not fragile. That solidity allows connection to form without fear of emotional volatility. Inner stability also reflects boundaries. A man who refuses to chase does not confuse effort with self-sacrifice. He invests where there is reciprocity and withdraws where there is disregard. His decisions are not reactive, they are deliberate. That deliberateness signals maturity and emotional intelligence. What makes this trait so compelling is that it cannot be faked for long. Anyone can pretend to be indifferent. Very few can remain composed without becoming cold or resentful. Inner stability allows a man to feel disappointment without becoming bitter, to experience loss without becoming desperate, and to walk away without needing to destroy what once mattered. This refusal to collapse does not mean he feels less. It means he feels responsibly. He processes emotions privately, not as a performance. He does not seek attention through pain or attempt to guilt someone into staying. His strength lies in containment, not suppression. Over time, this stability leaves a lasting impression. Drama fades, words are forgotten, but composure under emotional pressure is remembered. It lingers because it contrasts so sharply with emotional chaos. A man who holds himself together when it would be easier to fall apart becomes unforgettable. Inner stability is not about control over others. It is about control over the self. And that self-mastery, the calm refusal to beg, chase, or collapse, is the trait women can't ignore because it reflects a man who knows who he is, even when everything else shifts. In the end, the man who walks away is remembered not for anger, not for drama, and not for absence alone, but for the strength he carries quietly in every step he takes. Each action, each pause, each refusal to beg, chase, or collapse speaks louder than words ever could. He leaves with dignity, calm, and clarity, showing that true power lies not in control over others, but in mastery over oneself. Women cannot ignore a man like this because his inner stability, emotional independence, and unwavering self-respect create a presence that lingers long after he is gone. He does not need to fight to be seen or validated because his worth has always been known, and that ultimately is the one trait that cannot be overlooked.